It's a Saturday morning and I'm sitting in a little shaded area in the corner of our yard that's just an oasis. And I'm wondering, why don't I sit here more often? It's going to be a hot day, but sitting here with look at the flowers and the lawn's been watered, so there's that sense of it's fresh. It's a new day. But I wanted to actually just be quiet a little bit. And as I was sitting here, I thought, I also want to talk. We need to be quiet enough to hear the voice of God. And there is a lot of noise these days. There is a lot of noise on all the news networks. There does seem to be more news in one day than there would have been in a month or a week. And there's a sense of us being roiled up and not knowing really what to do. And being quiet and listening is essential. It was a Saturday morning, March 12th, 1994, when I knew something had to change in my life. And I'd been out on a bike ride, and I rolled back in to the house and called the family together in the front room, and I said, I have a drinking problem. You know, you guys have known that, and you've tried to talk to me about it, but I get it. I have a drinking problem, and I need to go to AA, not for you, but for me. And it was that moment of clarity that there was something deeply broken in me. Now, I had no idea what all that would mean. And my first meeting that Saturday night, after I called a guy in the church to say, you know, John, I got a drinking problem, and I know you're the guy to call. And he said, we'll go to a meeting. And we went to some meeting up in Santa Rosa. I have no idea. It was just a deer in the headlight experience for me. But that started a journey that I'm still on. And what I discovered sitting in AA were the 12 steps, which as I studied them and researched them and learned the history, these are the spiritual principles that are in the Bible, that have been part of our spiritual traditions. And yet we had pushed them away and had forgotten them in the church. But when applied, they worked. And there would be a sense of serenity and peace, even in the midst of the chaos. And we would know what the right thing to do would be. That sense of things that were baffling to us would become clear. And in that morning, gathering the family, go, I have a problem, and I can't fix it. And over the coming weeks, I realized that in so many ways I had not turned my will and my life over to the care of God. And then we bumped into the fourth step. And I've been thinking a lot more about that not only was essential for me to start the journey, and I've continued to participate in, to the best of my ability, a searching moral inventory. And more is revealed as I open myself up, as I listen. More is revealed about who I am, both good and the not so good. And there is healing. And then talking over, and then addressing the character defects, steps 6 and 7, and to realize what are the forces that drive me to do the things that I don't want to do. There's Paul in Romans 7 talks about the human dilemma. You know, why don't I do the things I want to do, and I keep doing the things I don't want to do? And then steps 8 and 9, which are figuring out what are the amends that need to be made, and then prayerfully and carefully making those amends as long as they don't damage other people. And thinking about our national situation right now, and I am pressing a conversation around race, and it is upsetting people. I understand that. It's nothing new. I've tried to talk about it before, and I've tried to address it in my own life. But that's one of those ongoing the step work. There is a problem, and I can't fix it. That God can and will. But I have to be open, and I have to begin to tell the truth about myself and take that spiritual inventory, not only personally, but I think for us as the community here in Sonoma, and for us nationally, that race is an issue that just keeps coming up because we're unwilling to really have the conversation. One of the things that struck me walking the streets of Berlin is that not all, but the majority of the German people, as reflected in their government, are absolutely committed, 100%, to remember and to talk about what happened during the Nazi era and own all of that. The monuments that have been put up, the places to be still. There's a new one that has to do with the Roma and the LGBTQ people that died in the Holocaust. These places of reflection. And walking the streets, they have what's called stumbling stones. They're little brass plaques that are embedded in the cobbles next to a building where these are the names of the Jewish families that were taken from this building, never to be seen from again. That sense of remembering that we need to stumble over our past in order to continue to own it and to continue to address what were the character defects that drove this. And it's a never-ending process. It's not a one and done. And that's something that we just don't want to do. In the U.S., we've got a lot of monuments to the Civil War, but now we have, for the first time, a museum on lynching around the Jim Crow era that emerged out of the Civil War as racism became institutionalized in a different form. And I know a couple weeks ago in a message, I think it was just last week, mentioned that here in Sonoma, beautiful, idyllic Sonoma, into the 70s, there were realtors that would advocate and promise that there was redlining in this town, that you could be assured in this neighborhood it wasn't going to get disturbed by those people, wink wink. And I've had a couple people come up and say that's not true. It's not true today. I think we're really moving away from that, but it was true. Checking that story out with folks that were in the town back in the day, and these are things that if we don't talk about, they just keep bubbling up. Not only in my personal life, the stuff I need to talk about and deal with, but for us as a nation. And a verse that has popped up before is 2 Chronicles 7:14, and the context quickly for that is King David wasn't where he was supposed to be. I love that phrase. He wasn't where the kings were supposed to be in the spring, out checking out the borders of their land. He was back in Jerusalem, and then he saw Bathsheba, and they had an adulterous affair. He married her, he stole her, he actually murdered her husband, and made her one of his wives. And King Solomon was born of that illicit affair. And David had always wanted to build the temple for God on the Temple Mount, and God said, you're not going to be the guy. There's blood on your hands. You're not going to be the guy. It'll be your son that builds the temple. So in fact, Solomon builds the temple on the Temple Mount, and he has this magnificent prayer of dedication and a week of celebration. And I can imagine him going to bed exhausted. This has been a time of festivities and events. The temple is finished, and God comes to him at night. God comes to us when we're still. And he had this vision, this promise that God said, everything's going to be okay. If you follow what I told you to do, if you practice mercy, justice. And that really is the gist of the law. In Micah, so well, what do you, I've told you what I want. Humble yourselves. Do justice. Embrace mercy for your neighbors. And then God says, if you don't do that, it's not going to go well. And it didn't go well for Israel. Solomon ultimately went down the wrong path. But there's this little gem hidden there in 2 Chronicles 7:14. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will heal their land. Now that sounds to me an awful lot like a fourth and fifth step that we at least need to be willing to consider might be something we need to do. God bless.